Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Malik, and welcome to this fourth and final webinar in our series on leveraging pediatric screening. In the previous three webinars, we basically walked through CJ Peek's three worldview of clinical, operational, and financial, and kind of walked through how going electronic with your processing basically allows you to be far more effective clinically and solve a whole lot more problems in terms of operational sort of things. And now it really comes down to, what's it really going to take to make this thing happen? I mean, it's a process change, so you have to stay on top of that sort of stuff. But there really is, using the apps and so forth, it's actually pretty easy to put this whole thing together. So that's what we're going to get into here in webinar number 4. So let's look at what screening is going to look like in your clinic. So some of the things we're going to have to walk through are just, what kind of screening protocols are you going to put in place? I mean, what are the things you're going to try to measure and manage? And then we need to think about what level of automation are you going to get to, and maybe you kind of phase things out and do it in pieces and so forth. And what are some of your equipment requirements? Then we look at, maybe a plan for your EMR integration. Maybe don't bite that off immediately. So just kind of get the screening working first and then work your way up to the full integration sort of thing. So you don't have to take things in too quickly and so forth. And then, basic issues around training and support. And, as I kind of alluded to, you probably want to implement in phases. So just kind of think about the whole thing overall as a project, and, just kind of set reasonable expectations with everybody and help the process along. First thing we need to look at are, what are the screening protocols you want to get into? So if you think about all of the essentially guidelines, AAP and US United States Parent Service Task Force, you end up with, an age, basically an age-based sort of protocol that you need to think about. And so in that first 0 to 3 months, you're probably just looking at the maternal depression sort of thing. And so, you're probably using EPDS, or you use a PHQ-9 for that sort of stuff. But once you get up, actually within now that the range is extended down on the ASQ3 down to 2 months, you can actually pull off a 2-month right away. But as far as developmental sort of screenings go, your autism sort of things don't really kick in until around 18 months, although there are some new screening techniques and so forth out there that may be able to take it down lower. And then, at 1 year, you're already into the behavioral and social emotional sort of things, and you're already recommendations that you should be doing your ASQs by then. But you can do those down to as much as 6 months old and so forth. And then as you get past the 0 to 5 and get out into school age sort of things, and then you're really more of, you're kind of monitoring pediatric symptoms and so forth, which eventually grows into, you kind of wean off of the developmental sort of issues and move your way into the more of the behavioral. And eventually it's just basically flat mental health sort of issues. And then, you might think about maybe having core screeners and then having a set of assessments around that are kind of like for more in-depth, and maybe just kind of stick them out in your main menu and you just kind of pull them up when you need them. So maybe you're getting a lot of anxiety or worry, or you think somebody's having some specific problems or so forth, or maybe you want to go off and do a Vanderbilt and look at some ADHD and so forth. So you can just kind of have those already queued up for you sort of thing, and put those within the scope of the different types of measures that you're willing to use and so forth. And so then you need to work for those sorts of things. Then you got to review, what are your referral sources or destinations and so forth, and think about your educational material associated with those, and think about the reporting that you want to do associated with those as well. So we need to think about your level of automation. I mean, what level do you want to get to? I mean, the dirt simplest, easy way to do things is you just go get a tablet. I mean, we don't really recommend Kindles in office environments because they don't really stand up on the wireless side of things as well. But you can just go get a Kindle for $50-$60 and be up and running. But a good Android tablet or something like that, maybe a 10-inch or a 9-inch or something like that, those work pretty well. But with a single tablet, you can already be up and running. You don't have to really do anything else, and you can even get your results right on your tablets as well. But in most cases, you're going to want to do some level of management of that information. So you'll probably have one on a PC, or even you can actually go through a portal and so forth and do a front desk sort of application on even a tablet, or actually on tablets as well. You can do your front desk, but you can get in there and start managing, just the results themselves, or you can start getting into maybe launching from this front desk or whatever. And eventually, the next level up is obviously you get into the EMR and you do the scheduling directly from the EMR instead of through a front desk. And then, it comes down to, after that, where the administration is going to get done. Are they going to be up in a portal? Are they going to be up in, from an at-home? And how are you going to access them? Is it going to be through a portal? Or going to be through a direct link? Or, do you just plan on only doing it in the office? And then, on the other side of that whole thing is when you start thinking about where does your data want to go? I mean, are you going to want to just get a hard copy printout and use that and scan it into your EMR? Or you're going to import PDFs? If you have that EMR integration already working, then, obviously you can just pull them in direct. But then think about, are you going to want to manage some of this data? Are you going to look at population sort of stuff? So maybe you want to throw stuff into a data warehouse. And in some places, there are like state level sort of health information exchanges where you want to kick your data over to a health information exchange, which can be done automatically for you as well. So there's lots of places to route your data and so forth. So you need to think about, what are the different levels you want to get to there. And then you need to think a little bit about your equipment. You need to think reasonably in terms of what do you expect to be your annual volume at a given site and so forth. That really depends on how many physicians you have working there, and then how much you expect to get done at home before they show up in the office. So you kind of get an estimate of what do you think the volume is going to look like inside that office setting, because that's the only place you need the equipment. If you're doing it from home or in a portal sort of thing, then obviously the parent or the patient is using their own equipment for that sort of thing. So in the office, you need to assume, just a quick calculation there is just, there's $2,000 hours in a year just for something round to work with. So if you're doing one administration per hour, basically you can cover 2,000 administrations, 200 an hour, so one every half hour. And then you can even on some of these, depending if you start getting some really long stuff, you might be pushing to push it out to 3 in an hour, because that's like 20-minute cycles sort of thing. But in most cases you can get away with that. A lot of your ASQs or your ASQ3s and so forth will take maybe on the order of 12 minutes on average is what we're seeing to get those pushed through. So, it just depends on how fast your flow is moving and so forth. But, you might want to keep it down to the 4,000 region. So assume about 2 per hour per tablet. And that can give you an idea of how many tablets you need. The other thing that you might want to do is think about possibly handling peak flow sort of thing. So if you bring in a lot of patients all at once, say, after lunch or something like that, or certain times, there might be a peak flow situation where you want to maybe have an extra tablet around just to cover that sort of stuff. And then in terms of the tablets, we kind of alluded to this a little bit, but, probably your highest quality, is probably your iPad, but you're going to pay more for it. The Galaxy tabs are actually plenty rugged enough in most settings and so forth. So for about half the cost, you can probably get away with a Galaxy tab. Or we see a lot of Lenovo's out there right now. But any sort of Android tablet will work fine for this. If you think a little bit from your IT perspective, they're going to want to do some sort of mobile device management in many cases. And so both the iPads and the Androids will support that kind of stuff, but your Kindles won't make it there. But if you want a really low-cost solution, just go get yourself a Kindle Fire, and you can be up and running for $60. I mean, it's not, and it works fine. You just have to be careful about the wireless connection can kind of go away on you sometimes, so it may take a while or a little bit of work to get your data to transmit through if you're running into those situations. But we have lots of offices using Kindle Fires as well. But probably the recommendation there would probably go with the Galaxy tab. It gets you the most other applications that you can run on that tablet as well. So if you're doing other stuff inside your office, it probably works well on a Galaxy tab. We're finding that Android tablet is probably the most popular out there. Kind of plan your EMR integration. So we need to think about this a bit in terms of you want to start out with, even when you start your screening, you're going to want to engage your IT department. So you got to worry about things like security and access. And then the way we make all our stuff work together is we have basically a data exchange sort of capabilities. And so that data exchange can be an internal product or it can be external. It's basically all HIPAA compliant. But your IT department may have something to say about that in terms of what they want to see on security. but we've never run into a situation where we can't satisfy their requirements. We de-identify everything. So what it comes down to is that even if they broke into our data center, there's nothing they can connect it to. It's just a bunch of essentially de-identified data. So ultimately you can solve all these sorts of problems, but you need to engage them early, let them know what's going on, and start working into that. And then what you're going to find then is if you're going to do the EMR integration, then there's probably an EMR interface team available within your organization. And so then the kind of things that you want to meet with them and have some discussions, and we can be part of those discussions as well. But what you're looking for is that scheduling feed coming out, which is pretty standard. It's a standard SIU message in most HL7. You're going to see it over the place. The lab data, it's all going to be ORU, so those are all observational results and so forth coming back in. And then the big thing is you just have to get that routed over. So you may have to have that discussion, whether you're entering it manually or bringing in through a lab result. You still have to have that discussion of where you're going to locate that data and how are you going to access it, or that report or whatever you're putting inside your system. So you still have to get that worked out. And once you have that worked out, then it's just a matter of routing the input lab data, whatever fields you've sent in, making sure they get over to where they need to be. And that's within the EMR interface side of this whole thing. And they can handle all that sort of stuff. And then the last thing you need to engage them about is just, how are you going to handle the error handling and the maintenance of those sorts of things if you run into those sorts of problems. If you're coming, that ends up being more of an issue if you're only going unidirectional. If you're doing bidirectional, just basically everything is routed back in with the exact identifiers that the scheduling was done with. And so there really isn't an error handling sort of problem or anything that you need to worry about there. Where we run into that sort of problem, and we really advise against it, is don't allow people just to enter an ID on a tablet and then expect that to make it into the EMR, because any sort of fat finger on that ID, it's not going to land in the right spot, and then someone's going to have to go in and handle that manually, and it's always a problem. So, you really want to launch, and if you're hooking up to your EMR, you definitely want to do it bidirectional. Once you get past all that kind of stuff, what will end up happening is it will end up specifying some HL7 messaging specs. And so what will come down to is that scheduling message will be something that comes from within your system. It will be based on the version of HL7 that you're on. You'll just give us one of those. We'll have our side automatically pull out what we need from that. And then based on what you think you're going to want in terms of data coming back in, we'll propose an ORU message, or if you have a specific one that your group wants, but we'll propose a message and we'll have a test message sent back to your folks. Each side will work on that independently, and they can test it out and program in and so forth, but to get test messages going individually. And then we turn around and just do some end-to-end on a pre-production testing setup. And then finally, we just do some deploys and we go ahead and do end-to-end testing, and we can release it to production at that point. It's a process, and no doubt about it. But actually, some of the hardest parts of the whole thing are actually getting everybody to agree on what data are you going to put in the EMR, and where are you going to put it at, and how are you going to access it, and basically on what forms and what tabs within your setup are you going to put those in. And all those are configurable by location. Usually there's an informatics person in the bigger systems that's going to help you with that sort of thing. But that's your biggest problem. The actual mechanics of moving this in and getting it routed and doing the actual messaging and getting the IT hooked up, that's really straightforward. I mean, it's pretty simple. And we do those kind of interfaces all day long. The real issue is just getting the data laid out where you need it to be. So anyway, just setting expectations about that EMR integration. So you're probably going to want to plan that and get that worked out, and just get the people talking, and just understand it's probably not going to happen right away. But one of the things we do recommend is go ahead and start your screening, and then, worst case, just get your results out as PDF and then just import the PDFs. Most all EMRs can import that PDF. I mean, worst case, you make a hard copy, or we send it in as a TIFF file or something of that nature. So you're just getting the report into the system, and that's, you have to manually push that in, but there's literally no EMR integration at that point. But you can still get your screening going and see if it's going to work for you and so forth. So we definitely recommend treating the EMR integration as kind of like a second phase sort of thing. And then training, basically what you're going to want to end up doing is probably a train the trainer situation. just depending on how big your organization is and so forth. We'll probably want to work with your IT. We'll actually do the IT support to a large extent if there's any sort of issues about getting anything through and so forth. But then when you start using components like the PTI front desk, there's many different views depending on what functions you're using inside of there. So there may be some in-service sort of things that you want to do there. Just even using a basic tablet, there may be some in-service stuff that you want to do there. And so that could be something that can be manually trained, or you'll go through essentially YouTube sort of videos, and you basically hit a page that has all those sorts of things connected up, and you get people to go through a training session. But all in all, it's really intuitive, really straightforward, and really not that much to it. So it doesn't take much to get those going. Where you kind of end up with, from the support perspective, not so much the training, is really more of, if there's any sort of problems from the IT side, and depending on how integrated you are in your IT, we may have to have more conversations than not about getting that sort of set up. But we're actually all, engineers and IT types of people. So, that's actually what we do all day. We're really not around the content per se. So that's what we do, and we're more than happy to support anybody. And it's all included as part of those administration fees. So there's no extra for the tech support. Like we say, implement in phases. So, for clinic, probably want to start with clinic-based administrations and get that sort of stuff going. If you're going to a remote portal where you're just going to use links and so forth, you're not going to try to hook it up to your patient portal internally. That's really simple, so you can easily expand from just those clinic-based sort of assessments out to that level. So you can actually do part of phase 3 depending on how you're implementing, but you can just launch from that front desk and go right out. And then, kind of a phase 2, then obviously relative to that clinic, then obviously is getting that EMR integration as we kind of laid out. It's a little longer process, but, once you get that going, then you kind of cut all that staff labor out of the whole process, and everything is completely seamless and automated at that point. Then your third level is if you do want to hook it into your own patient portal, we kind of recommend doing that last, because then we can automatically get that EMR integration going, automatically launch from the EMR out to your portal and so forth. So, there's that aspect of things is what we're finding is most people are not real happy with going through their own portal. They really prefer the direct links and so forth. So just whatever combination of those things work for you. So it may end up being a phase 3 sort of activity, or you might actually start some of that way back at phase 1 if you want to. But think about it as a process. Get some innovators out there that want to get involved with the screening. Get them doing it first at a clinic level is usually the best way to go. You want to put together an overall plan for all this. So, most of this stuff is going to end up being configuration sort of thing. So a lot of it will just be discussions with us about what you want to do. Most all these screenings are already in content packages, so that's all ready to go. All these implementations are already done. They're in mobile device sort of formats, so they're real easy to go to whatever type of thing that you want in terms of how you're going to do it, whether it's a PC or a tablet or a smartphone and so forth. You're going to also want to think about, what measures are you going to combine together in these protocols and so forth. But we can do all that just through configurations. Once again, this whole thing ends up being, a lot of it is just literally configuration. That's all it really comes down to, with a little bit of training. If you want to get started, it's real simple. You just set up some app accounts, you download some apps, we install them. If we need to, walk through it together, we can. We can do the in-service training together, or you can just pick them off of videos. And then, you can start with literally one tablet doing screening, and work your way out to a full-up system across the entire region, like we do with Kaisers and stuff like that. So, you just kind of expand in phases, and as groups become involved with it, you may want to, kind of comb out in specific verticals. So maybe you start out in pediatrics, but you can also go across to primary care. You can go across to your pain management groups and so forth, are really some of the primary areas that we get into. There's whole areas. You can do the entire organization in an automated screening fashion if you really want to expand out that far. So you kind of work out where you want to go. So hopefully that gives you a quick idea what it takes to pull all this stuff together. There's a ton of work that's already been done for you, and it's really simple to implement. I mean, quite literally, you go up to the Apple App Store and download an app, or you go to Google Play or the Google, I guess they call it the Play Store now, and pull down an app, and you're up and running. Or you go to the Amazon App Store and pull down some apps, and you're up and running. So it's real simple to push through. So anyway, hopefully all that is making sense, and it's something that would make sense in your environment. So please scroll down below. There's a contact form down there. So if you want to explore this stuff further, please fill that out and let us know. And hopefully we'll be doing some work with you soon. Thank you very much for your time.